So good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us this morning on our online Ndalama Insights business show. Today, I'm joined by Monica Msonda, who's a Zambian lawyer turned entrepreneur. She's held a number of positions and has received a number of awards, but she's best known for founding and also leading the Zambian food processing company called Java Foods. And so we are going to hear from Monica this morning. She's going to share her insights into how you can adapt in an ever-changing market economy, or where you're seeing shifts every now and then. So we want to learn from Monica on this topic. Thank you, Monica. And just introduce yourself briefly to our viewers and listeners that have not heard from you.
Sure. First of all, thank you very much for having me, and a really great show. I think with everything happening, these are things we need to be discussing. So really great topic, and thank you for having me. I think you've done a great introduction already, but I will do a little bit of an introduction. Yes, I was a lawyer for many, many years, a Zambian qualified lawyer, as well as an English solicitor. Was privileged enough to work in a number of countries in corporate as well as private sector, but then wanted to come home because I really felt that you could make a fundamental difference in your home country. So I moved back in 2012 and decided not to follow what I had studied, but to do something around entrepreneurship, around starting my own business, and really stumbled in food processing because of the opportunity at the time which was presented to me, which was around a very young population, making this different consumption decisions. So if you look around today, me and you are eating very differently from what our parents used to eat. And we're spending our money differently. And we have all these different choices available to us. And I feel that's an opportunity. What are people eating now, and what could we offer them? And I'm really focused on using locally grown raw materials. So as you know, we do pretty good in growing food. We don't do very well in making food, but we're hoping that now there's a trend, and we'll talk about this, what COVID opportunities they are, that we really have to now process much more food locally. And that's where we started Java. And we're really grateful for a lot of our consumers who believed in us and our brands. Easy Instant Noodles is a leading instant noodle brand in this country. And we're now working closely with partners in Zimbabwe and Botswana to also do the same there. We're really hopeful. And but I think now it's about strategy. I've been operating the business now over almost 8 years. And now your question about managing market dynamics is so important now. Now it's not just, this and that, I'm going to Timber store. Now it's really thinking about sustainability,
That's
about
very true.
scale.
Yeah.
So I'm very happy to share my experience with your listeners. Yeah.
Thank you so much. I wanted us to start by finding out how this crisis, this pandemic, is affecting your industry and your business as Java Foods, and then we'll roll from there.
Sure. So 2 or 3 days ago on Twitter, I actually said at the beginning of the year, nobody would have seen this. So every year we sit down with my board to do assessments and strategy for the year. We had not even talked about COVID. COVID was something over there. And we really believed, we had obviously heard about it in China, and we really believed the Chinese were going to contain it. In fact, what we were talking about is now we can't buy stuff from China because of the delays. 2 months later, everything around us started locking down. You could never have imagined it. And for us, what it did show us in March with the lockdown of countries like South Africa and the lockdown of borders around us. Zambia didn't lock down its borders, but everybody around us did. And you can imagine for us who are in the processing or manufacturing sector, who bring in anything from machinery, packaging, flavors from outside of the country. A lot of manufacturers do import inputs to make a final product. There was a huge panic. How are we going to move product? How are we continuously going to have product on the shelf for our consumer if we didn't have the raw material? So that was one of the first sort of panics around it. And we were very fortunate that government saw that and began quickly to engage with other governments to make sure there was a movement of product. But the second thing, which I'm sure everybody felt, not just us manufacturers, was a depreciation of the kwacha. It happened like overnight. The kwacha lost its value in 25% in a few days. And if you notice very quickly, everything then went up. Locally manufactured and also very much imported products. It just skyrocketed. And for us, it meant that my inputs now costed 2 or 3 times much more than they did. It also meant that now I needed to increase my prices, but it hurt my consumers whose salaries were not increasing. So COVID presented a really tricky situation around sales, around inputs, around safety for staff, because I couldn't. Everyone was like, stay home, work at home. I can't move my manufacturing business into my house.
Yeah.
Any one time on site, we have 40 people. What were we going to do?
Let
So,
me let me bring it down to your leadership, or the leadership level, you as the CEO of the company, because this is affecting many CEOs of different companies. So how has this impacted your leadership style, or what changes have you had to make for you to, adapt to this new environment, new normal as they're calling it?
Yeah, and we're still adapting because we don't know when it's going to settle, right? So I've got to tell you, it's challenged me on a personal level, not really knowing where and what to do, and also how to motivate my staff. It's very scary on a health side, and you're demanding for them to continue working, but they're fearful for their families, and what does this mean in terms of how they're going to survive, etc. And you have to find the leadership to govern in crisis. I have a board of directors. We've been operating a little longer, so we do have a board, and they have been very supportive. We've constantly had special meetings to discuss new events, because every month there's been something caused by COVID. And also they've been very encouraging to get me a professional coach, because nobody knows. I mean, I definitely do not have the answers. I would never know how to deal with this kind of crisis. There are all sorts of crises, business related risks, but this one is new and it's changing every day, So I got a professional coach, and I really relied on my management team and we actually did it as a team to say, okay, what can we do? What can we not do? Do we need to speak to our customers much more to say that maybe we're going to delay, or the price is going up, or we won't continue with the product? Do we need to continue talking to our employees to say that, now we may be okay, but if this pandemic continues, we might need to have a discussion on benefits and how we can continue keeping the lights on, because it's a real conversation. In the food sector, perhaps we're a little bit more fortunate, but you can imagine in hospitality, in tourism, that conversation must be very hard for a CEO. But it's really been good to lean on a professional coach and a very experienced board, and that has really helped me.
Brilliant. Let's take a look at measures or steps that entrepreneurs like yourself and myself can take in this period for us to really survive this crisis. What measures would you advise entrepreneurs take?
So I think, first of all, as an assessment of really understanding, if you can, and maybe this is going to be a moving target, and maybe it's a weekly or every 2 weeks you're having a discussion about what the current situation is, but you can't solve it if you don't really understand how it's impacting the business. So you really have to understand, are your customers still taking product? Are they are you affected by slow payments? Do you have power? I mean, power has now become an issue. Maybe it's not COVID, but power is an issue. Do we only operate in the nighttime? What does this mean? So you really kind of have to dissect the impacts of these shifts, of these challenges, and understand what it's doing to the business. And only then can you then start sort of handling them one by one. So a perfect example, let's talk about the supply chain issue for us. We very quickly realized that we import some of our inputs from South Africa, and they closed overnight in March. I mean, it was literally shut down. It wasn't a phase 1 or whatever it was called. And then we had to now speak to our suppliers, and we couldn't get them. So we began very quickly to speak to people in the industry here in Zambia and say, do you have this raw material that we can buy from you? When do you need it by? How much can we buy it from you? We needed to solve it right away. And if we weren't going to solve it by the 10th, for instance, then we knew we needed to write to the customer to say that we will not have this product because we have a supply chain issue. Fortunately enough, we were able, South Africa somewhat operated particularly for essential services. So the food industry was an essential service. So we were still able to move things into Zambia. But that's the kind of thinking we were going through, understanding, dissecting problem to problem, and seeing how we could then solve it. And I think it's continuous. So what we had a crisis in April is not the same as the crisis in August right now. So you almost have to do this, if you can, on a weekly basis, if you can, monthly. And another really good one is financing. I mean, in April, the banks were not necessarily, trying to back down on interest, right? And then we saw, and it was really scary because we thought, we're not selling as much, but my bank still expects me to pay at the same rate. And what does this mean? Do I need to have a discussion with my bank to change that? But fortunately, the dynamics changed in May when the Bank of Zambia stepped in and reduced the MPC and also made available some funding. And therefore, we were able to say to the bank, now you have no excuse. You have to reduce your rates. And you have to now have a discussion with me about how I can pay. So dynamics change week to week, month to month, but you've got to kind of keep on dissecting them.
In terms of the offering from the government to SMEs, basically financing from the Bank of Zambia, is that something you're aware about? Did you apply to take part in that? Or how is it going with you? Because many are interested in that.
Yeah, so I think the first 10 billion was a bit more complicated. And I think they realized that later that it really was not necessarily targeted at SMEs, such as my business, or maybe we're a little bit bigger than an SME. But I think, and a bulk of businesses in Zambia, by the way, are SMEs. They're very big. There are very few very big businesses. And if you're a big business in Zambia, you're probably able to borrow elsewhere, right? So for SMEs, the 10 billion when it first came out, it all sounded very nice. And remember, this money was going through banks. And banks were not at the time really as flexible on how they were going to lend the money. They were still going to use the same yardstick as they normally do. So if you wanted to borrow 100,000 kwacha, they expected you to bring security, fixed asset worth 150,000 kwacha to borrow 100,000, right? And then you had to pay all the fees and things like that. So I think that, it really pushed a lot of SMEs, like, I really need this, but I don't have an asset. The interest rate is still quite high. So how am I going to access this? So I think there was a little bit more thinking put into it. And I think now there's another fund coming up that we can, SMEs can now access. However, I have to say, I believe it's too slow. We're now in our fourth, almost fifth month of COVID. You can imagine for someone who was an events planner, who has had no events from April, and only now funded. So how has she paid her workers? How has she paid her debt? Her rent. So I think we would have wanted, definitely, if I could speak for SMEs, a much quicker action, softer terms, because it's a crisis which they haven't caused, right? So everyone must come to the party to protect the economy, to protect the SMEs, to protect jobs. And I just think that it could have been quicker, and a little bit more discussion on what was really needed. Yeah.
I think it just brings to light whether our financial institutions are actually ready to partner with small businesses, which many times businesses complain, and we know where that discussion leads us to. I want us to move on to helping ourselves into identifying new opportunities in different industries. I know you are in manufacturing. What opportunities are available now that you didn't have prior to COVID-19 that you are now embracing and taking advantage of?
So just to give you context, my biggest sales are to school children on the instant noodle side. Schools closed on the 18th of March, right? So for us as well, we began to see our leading product was probably not moving off the shelf as quick because, it's still moving because people still eat noodles. But I can tell you at the beginning of every school term, it was like a mad pandemonium for noodles. And we haven't had it because we haven't had schools open. But it really made us rethink about what else we do and the importance of actually having different things going on at the same time. If I can say so, you cannot rely on one thing. So if I only had noodles, I can tell you we would be very stuck. But what happened is that we were able to pivot the business slightly. We realized out of this COVID pandemic, there was a lot of discussion around nutrition, around eating well, around NGOs really looking out for the vulnerable communities. And therefore we thought, okay, this could be an opportunity for us. We do a fortified cereal called Super Cereal. It's relatively new. We put it in a nice box, but we also thought, is there an opportunity for us to speak to an NGO who is feeding children at home now because they're no longer at school, or really helping some very vulnerable people? And it's something we didn't really do earlier. And now we thought we now need to really do to engage those who are really supporting the vulnerable and see how we can work with them. And it has really changed the business slightly. I mean, it's still small and growing, but we are now manufacturing more HEPs, which is a high energy protein cereal, in order to support these NGOs. So these NGOs range from people like Plan International. There are a number of people who are working in this space, and we continually talk to them and to understand what is it that they're doing and how can we support them. So to back to your question, those are the kind of opportunities you want to see. Are you able to pivot the business? So if you are an event planner, what can you do now? Given what with the resources that you have, because there are very few events, is it possible? People are really using online platforms to organize, to have conferences now. Is it possible for you to pivot the business now to an online network? So all the things which would have had a conference room, go and engage your clients and say, let me set up this kind of system that you have, a Zoom call, a webinar, let me get people together, let's charge a small fee but you have to kind of see where the market is going. And I think we're seeing definitely online platforms. I haven't been to a conference in God knows how long, but I've been on a conference online. So it's really understanding where the market is shifting. For instance, even on the retail side, people are now getting deliveries at home. So should I as Java now be speaking to a delivery service to say, can I put some of my products on your website so that you can deliver directly to my customer? So it's really around, again, understanding the market, what the market is shifting to, and seeing and moving with it, because surely you'll be left behind, you know? If you don't like innovation, irrelevance
and that's what I actually wanted to ask. For those that feel like we are waiting until COVID-19 ends and then we'll get back, I mean, what's your advice to them?
I mean, how long are you going to wait? That's what I got to ask, because it's not, can you see what we're going through now? I mean, do you remember April, everyone was at home and quiet and we thought we had defeated it. And now we're in August and the numbers are rising every day, and there's we don't know when there's going to be a vaccine. We don't know when it's going to end. So what does that mean for a business? And particularly, you know, businesses, and if you're a real entrepreneur, I hope you're not waiting. Entrepreneurs don't wait for things to come to them. Entrepreneurs go out. They should even, and I've got to say, you know, if events planning the way you want it, as a conference, a wedding, is no longer there, you can leave it for now and start a different business. I mean, it happens all the time that some businesses don't happen at that time, but start something else. I mean, I got to say, yesterday I was speaking to a young lady, and I was saying to her, but you've got a degree and you write very well. Why don't you go to some of these universities? There's a lot of people who are writing theses and who need someone to edit or to proofread for a fee. You know, people who are writing books, editors, publishers, people writing reports, strategic plans. You know, those are big documents. You can actually proofread in your house for a fee, but you kind of have to think differently about what your offering is. Am I able to do this? Can I do it from my home? Can I charge for it? And will someone pay for it? So I really hope our small business owners and our entrepreneurs are saying, okay, I have this, what else can I do? Because there is always something to do under the sun, by the way. There's always something you can do. It may take a little longer, but I think there's always an opportunity.
I like your point on being able to shift or to embrace new opportunities, or even just change your business model completely. Because we've seen COVID-19 has affected businesses in different ways. For others, it's completely changed your business. Maybe you may have to dump what you're doing and start doing something else. And so as an entrepreneur, instead of getting discouraged and feeling like you've lost everything, I think your suggestion of do something else Because if you are an entrepreneur, you definitely are looking out to other opportunities. And I think I don't know, maybe you can just do a minute more on that before we.
Yeah, and I tend to agree, and I'm trying to think of some really good ideas. I mean, I think parents, for instance, are so stuck on what they're doing at home. So if you have a school and you're closed because you're not able to open, what more can you do for parents who've got young children who need extra tuition? I mean, really, again, if you could use online platforms, of course, I think it's always very limited, but I think remember you're trying to survive a difficult period. So, and you're right, it may be that things go back, but it could be a year from now, but you really have to figure out what to do now. And people, I was saying the food industry, people never stop eating, but it's really understanding what the customer is willing to pay for now, right? So maybe they were eating chocolate last year, and but this year they're a bit more, tighter on the budget, but they're still trying to buy something for their kids to enjoy, and their budget as well. So what offering can that be? So it's really, really, really understanding, looking around, interrogating the market. Sometimes it's just worth speaking to people. So what do you think about this? Would you pay for it? How much would you pay for it? And how complicated is it? Because also you want to be able to do something which doesn't necessarily require right now a lot of capital, because it's really quite difficult to raise money and also to get paid. So you want to start off something which is easy to manage. Maybe you have one customer who pays you. That's all you need, right? So I think this is the time to put on your thinking caps and to do things differently. Never waste a good crisis, they say, because a crisis can actually get you to think different, force you to think differently. You could be a cake maker and everything is great. You have been doing birthday cakes, but now there are no birthdays. So what do you do now?
And we are not wasting this crisis. I mean, there's a lot to learn from this. This is a one in a lifetime. I think I'm calling it an opportunity, because for me, what it's done is it's pushed me into areas that I wasn't comfortable with, like virtual trainings and, doing the Ndalama Insights on a Facebook Live, on a YouTube channel. And
look at that.
These are things that I was
monetize it now. You've got to monetize it. To say,
yes.
If you want to access it, so now you have to make a business which makes money. But also, it's also, it's not only just about business, but it's also about mindset as well. Really use this time to interrogate your own strengths, to interrogate what is important for you. Really, maybe you actually didn't like the business you were running prior to COVID. So maybe it's really time. Maybe COVID actually has helped you move forward, right? So I really think it shows you your own strength. A good crisis will get through it. I mean, everyone gets through it somehow. But how do you want to get through it? So I think it's a time to say, yeah, it's not easy, but let me look at this. Let me talk to that person. Let me see what else I can do.
Thank you. So for those joining us on Facebook as well as Zoom, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm with Monica Msonda. She's the founder of Java Foods. And for those of you that have been to ShopRite, I buy easy noodles all the time when I'm in ShopRite. So she's the producer, or they are the ones that produce or manufacture Java easy noodles. So let's support Monica every time we go to a retail outlet and pick Java Foods. Okay. So Monica, there are so many, when you are in a crisis like this, there are so many things that you are juggling. What is the one thing you advise entrepreneurs focus on? Because I know you can't focus on all the things. So as the owner of the business, as the topmost CEO, what should you focus on?
Mm-hmm. So, and in a crisis like this, right? So there are a couple of things, not just one, I've got to say. So my first thing, because this is a health pandemic, right? Your first focus, or at least my focus, has been the health aspect. It would be terrible for us to ask people to come into work and we're just a COVID mess in here. So our first focus was really to ensure the health and safety of our workers and their families, because they go home, right? So what are we doing to make sure the families are safe, and educating our team? Because, for a little while, there was a lot of disbelief about this illness and really saying it's somebody else's illness. But now really to tell people, it can affect us and it can affect you. And the worst thing about it is you can die, right? So these are things we have had to do. And that is the leadership we've had to do, because it's not been as widely, the education has not been as wide, but it falls on us to do this, that. The second thing is about cash flow management, about making sure you're still able to survive, to keep the lights on. So lots of things. Immediately we decided seeing in April what is going to happen. The products I sold in March, everyone is not paying me in April. What does that mean for the business? What do I need to be doing? Do I need to be speaking to my customer? Do I need to get the product back? Do I need to make a payment plan for the customer? Do I need to speak to my bank? Do I need to cut off certain services? So that, it's all very nice to receive a newspaper every morning, but if you don't have money coming in, I think it's time to cut off the newspaper service and read the stuff online. But so all those things about managing your cash flow, making sure you're able to make payroll is an obligation. So I know there's some businesses say, well, if I have no money, I won't pay my workers. It is actually an obligation. You must pay. It's a fixed cost. You must pay your workers, right? So those are things that keep me up at night, is really understanding on a daily basis how much money we have in our account, what are my payables, and managing your payables. Those, if you're in a crisis, and Zambians don't do this very well, they don't pick up your call. They owe you money, right? They know you owe you. But really, business, if you're in it for the long term, let's have respect for each other. Call that person and tell them, so I'm in this sector and I'm not being paid. As you know, we're in COVID. Can I sit with you and talk about how I can make a payment plan for this? Is there a way we can sort it out, etc.? And you will find that people are much more willing to discuss with you if you're open like that, instead of making them shade for you, because it becomes a bit shady that you're not trying to address your cash flow issues. But really important to make it a priority every day to look at your cash flow. How are we doing? How are we managing? Can we make our fixed costs? If we can't, what can we do about it, right? I think the third thing is, and because I sell to customers, is speaking to my customer. I really need to understand, are my customers closing down? I mean, you saw last week Spa has closed down. What's going to happen? Do they have stock of mine? What happens to that area which used to receive easy noodles and now the shop is gone? How do I make sure my consumer is still able to get it? So we have continuously asked our salesmen to talk to them. Everyone is going through the crisis. It's on all of us. And so are you taking more volume? Are you taking less? Do you want this instead of that? It's really important for planning purposes. So I found that those are the three key things which I think we have continuously tried to do.
Thank you so much. So if you're joining us on Facebook and Zoom and you've got a question, please, you're welcome. We can now take your questions. You can either put it in the chat or just unmute and pose your question and we'll take it. So Monica, as we come to the end of the program, I want us to just highlight the key insights that we can take away from today's episode in terms of how a business can adapt to the ever-changing environment.
So I was going to say, it's a good point. I mean, ever-changing is right. I mean, we're talking COVID now, but there could be a different type of crisis later on. And I think so far for businesses in the past few years, we've been faced with things like depreciation. We've been faced with, lack of certain supplies. Those are still crises, right? So I think the key is, as you say, adapting to an ever-changing environment, making sure you're constantly assessing them. Don't get too comfortable in it. I mean, a crisis completely shifts your focus. So continuously assessing where you are and seeing how you need to change the business. If it's a case of changing it, if it's a case of completely moving on from it and starting something else, then that's possible as well. But I think this is the time really to see different opportunities and to kind of have courage and be brave.
Great. Any questions? We have Dingani, Frederick, Chongo, Kabanda.
Good morning. This is Frederick.
Hi, Frederick.
Yeah, very insightful discussion indeed. Very timely, as usual. So really appreciate this program. So mine is on how best can we foster maybe collaboration or coexistence amid the pandemic. How can we have mutual, support for these SMEs?
Yes.
Maybe there could be an exchange of service or support. Yeah, this SME specializes in this line of business, the other one in the other one. But then how do we create linkages or collaboration so that we coexist and continue surviving together? Your comment.
And I think that's a really great question. And I think that's also what is key, which has come out from this pandemic, is that, one, on a cost side, that you really do need to lean on others to achieve certain goals. And you need to find those solutions, right? Because you can't do everything. So a perfect example is around, for us in the food sector, around distribution. There are some smaller players who are doing great products, don't own their own vehicles, but have managed to be listed in a ShopRite or a Pick and Pay, and they have an order which needs to go to Mansa, So you really then want that SME to, be able to call on another SME and say, can we consolidate an order? If you have an order to Mansa, I do too. It doesn't make sense for me to just send this one box. Most sectors, we do have associations. So in the manufacturing sector, we have the Zambia Association of Manufacturers, and they do a pretty good job about sharing training, sharing platforms, and people can then email the secretariat to say, there's this, or I'm bringing a load from South Africa, I'm consolidating. If anybody else is interested, we can share the cost. And you're seeing a lot more of that, by the way. So I think distribution is also a really interesting one. An interesting one as well in the food sector is around food safety and technology. So the key issue about food is to make sure that you can actually eat it and it's safe to eat. The problem is to get that certification can be really expensive, and a lot of small players can't afford to bring a food auditor to come in. But what we can do as food processors is try to do it at the same time. So this one auditor is able then to go through all of the businesses, say in Lusaka, but it means that you all have to move at the same pace. It means that, to say this year, we're all going to work, that 5 of us, our food processors, will be certified. So let's share the cost of this audit. And honestly, right now, you'll find that people are much more willing to do this, because everyone is trying to save cash, is trying to get clients. So you can always have a discussion with someone on these sorts of shared issues. But I think using platforms of associations where you can get people of the same thinking in the same sector together also helps.
Thank you so much. Any other questions?
Good morning.
Morning.
Yes, Monica, how are you?
I'm fine. And yourself?
Thanks, I'm doing good. Thanks for the insight that you've provided. I've actually been following you for some time now. I enjoyed your TED talk that you had. It was also nice. My question borders on, I run a media agency. Mm-hmm. I've shelved an idea that I had, I think, for almost 2 years now. And I'm thinking, despite this crisis that we have, it could be probably the right time to bring it up. The idea was I come up with an all adverts paper, which would be distributed to the public for free. Now I'm thinking, since I'm not able to go out and distribute the same paper for free to the public, can I change the idea into maybe an online idea where I come up maybe with a website or even an app for me to help companies advertise with me? How can I go about with that idea? How can I transform it so that it suits the original idea that I had 2 years ago?
Well done first on the idea. And I think and you're actually in the right space. If there's a sector which is going to do very well and if you think differently, it will be the media space, right? So someone said to me, companies used to love billboards, and things like that. But if you're not leaving your house or you're staying in your neighborhood, you're not going to see the billboard which is on Kafua Road. It's going to cost my company more for someone people are not going to see it, right? So I think you're absolutely thinking the right way. I think what you got to do is, particularly, I'll give you an example. If you're talking to me as your client, I would be very interested in understanding where you're going, how you're going to distribute what platform you're going to use, because for instance, my customer is a very average person. You know, they can be someone who works in a household, can be a student, can be a bachelor. So remember, they're not people with lots of money. So I would be interested in saying, okay, what platform are you using which is not costing my customer much and can have access to you? So is that a Facebook?
Yeah.
Because I think apps are great, but apps tend to be restrictive on how far it goes. Because I'm interested in knowing how many people are accessing this platform. So I can say I know Facebook is really good at giving data, and it's that kind of data you show me. Say on my site I have 150 people between the hours of 9 and 12, and that interests me, right? And they all live in Lusaka.
Yeah.
And they're all women, you know, things like that. That's the kind of thing, that's how you kind of want to break it down. Understand who you're marketing it to. Are you doing fast moving consumer goods companies? Are you doing the telcos? Are you doing the banks? Because the banks have different people. The banks like, you know, maybe earners, you know, things like that. So it's really understanding who you want to target and then using the right medium to address it. But definitely you're thinking right about going online. Paper costs a lot of money. That's why the newspapers really struggle.
Yeah.
Imagine ink, manage distribution. And then I always wonder what happens after 12 when people are not buying papers and the guy is still holding the papers, right? But if I was that guy, I would charge a charger for all the street vendors to read the paper. I mean, at some point, no one is going to buy a paper, right? But there are people on the road who are just sitting. Charge them reading fee. I mean, why not, right? They're just sitting around.
Yeah.
So I think also, I always think, what do people do differently? Yeah, so, but good luck on it. And I think it's a great time because all I'm talking about now is, can someone come and tell me how to do digital? That's all I want to know, because digital, everyone is on their phone. Everyone is seeing, someone say pop-ups, whatever. That's all I want to hear now. I don't come and tell me about billboard, blah, blah. Digital is the way to go.
That is true. Thanks very much for your insight and your help.
Thank you. All the best.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Digani. Do we have any other questions? Any other questions? All right. So we are going to end the show now. I think just your final remarks, Musonda.
Yeah, so I would say, you know, guys, the world is your oyster, right? You're all, what I'm looking at all of you, you're all young. I mean, the advantage is that you're agile, you're willing to do different things, and you think differently. Remember what I said in the beginning is that our parents thought very differently about life. They thought differently about jobs. They thought differently about decisions around money. They thought differently around food. Whereas right now, you are in a world which is doing so many different things, and therefore don't restrict yourself to ideas which are the same. You know, try, and also you can try, and if it doesn't work on, fix it, change it, or try something else. It's, you only can learn, right? And also use this time to do a lot of online learning. There are a lot of free courses right now. You know, just really do some research, and you know, it's 1 + 1 is 2 all over the world, right? So if you get a free course out of Japan, take it and take what is interesting to you and what you can learn. But I would use this time to be like a sponge and learn everything you can. These sorts of Ndalama Insights are great. Well done to you, and continue to do them, because you will find that people will come to you and come on the platform because they can hear something which could help them maybe in their little business, or as they're rethinking things. So that's what I would say as a closing insight. Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Monica, for your time. And I hope you can join us next time again. There's a clap from Chongo and Frederick. Well done.
I love those claps. Those are cool.
They're cool, yeah. Thanks a lot for joining us also on Facebook as well as Zoom. This video is going to be uploaded on my YouTube channel, which is Mokonkela. So you can always go back and listen to Monica. And I hope you got valuable insights, in fact, actionable insights. Like I always say, you can have all the knowledge in the world, but if you don't turn them into action, then you're going to miss many opportunities. And so now we have some thinking to do after this program. Thank you to you all, and have a fabulous day. Enjoy yourselves, eh?
Thank you. Same to you. All the best, guys.